Hello everyone, this is Greg Brophy with Client Solutions at AnswerLab, and we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today for the webcast of Design for a Mobile Mind. First, I want to briefly share a little about AnswerLab before we get started. AnswerLab delivers trusted customer insights that help the world's leading brands build outstanding digital products and services. We focus exclusively on user experience research to understand what people see, do, think, and feel when using websites, mobile applications, and other digital products. AnswerLab has a decade of experience evaluating the user experience of the world's most visited desktop and mobile properties. Through hundreds of research engagements involving thousands of users across the product development cycle, AnswerLab has developed a suite of research solutions for every phase of the product development cycle. Before we get started, a quick housekeeping item. There is a Q&A in your panel in the view. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to enter them there, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the session. We have a lot of material to cover today, so now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenters, John Cheng, who is a user researcher at AnswerLab, and Jenny Gove, who is a user researcher at Google. John and Jenny, thanks, and you can take it from here.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg. Well, hello everyone. So before we get into our learnings on how to design great mobile websites, I want to tell you a story about a missed opportunity, a mobile experience that I had that illustrates why this is so important. So it was coming up to holiday party season at the end of last year, and I just arrived home from a long day at work, and I really gladly fell onto my couch. And immediately upon getting home, all of the needs I hadn't attended to came to mind. Now, I'm a mum of 3, so there's often quite a lot of home needs that are outstanding. And one of these was getting a costume that my daughter had wanted for an upcoming holiday party. She wanted to be a snow queen. It was getting pretty near to the date of the party, and so pretty late to shop for this. So I pulled out my phone to see what I could find for my then recently turned 6-year-old girl. My search brought me to a site I hadn't visited before, and the costume looked just right. So I went to purchase. But I was confronted with a horrible-looking form. It was really long, and no guest checkout. Now, I could have got up and walked the 15 feet to turn on my computer to make filling in that form a little easier. But that's the thing now with mobile. We have high expectations, and it's not that we're necessarily only out and about when we use mobile. We might well be at home, on the couch, and not wanting to move. So what did I do instead? Well, I navigated over to a very popular, well-known merchant site that I've visited many times before, which, if they had a Snow Queen outfit, would make purchasing a whole lot easier for me. I found a suitable Snow Queen costume and purchased it from there, all on my phone. So you see, I had one happy Snow Queen holiday party girl. That original Snow Queen costume was beautiful, and I wish I'd had the energy to purchase it because it was indeed really nice. But in the circumstances, to gain my business, that company would have had to make their purchasing process an easier and more seamless process for me. So why are we talking about this now, at this point in 2014? Well, because as we all know, there's an amazing growth of mobile use and increasing adoption and increasing conversion on mobile. This very recent graph shows the dramatic growth in mobile usage as a percentage of web usage. It's page views. Just from May last year to May this year, the growth is strong everywhere. And all this growth is great, right? Because using our devices is always a good experience, right? Just like this. I mean, this is kind of the marketing we tend to see for mobile devices, and it would have us believe that using a mobile device results in the happiest people in the world. Happy people smiling and using their mobile devices without so much as a squint or any slight frustration. Well, as a user experience researcher, I observe people's use of mobile websites and hear a lot of consumers' opinions about them. In the past, I've heard them describe mobile sites as cut down, harder to navigate, sparse in features, smaller, poor on design, and unfamiliar. They can be worried that they might miss something, and people often have this sense of time urgency on mobile. To give some more context, here's a participant quote from a mobile shopping study that we ran, where one of our participants described shopping for a birthday gift on a mobile website. I was worried I would miss something, or I wouldn't be able to read something, and I was worried about screwing something up. And you know, her birthday was coming up quick. So you can see in that example that people are just trying to get stuff done when they turn to mobile sites. Well, we want to fix these poor experiences, and the good news is that we know it can be done because there are some examples of really great sites out there that are engaging users. We at Google have been pretty vocal in the last couple of years about the importance of creating mobile sites. But given those things we've heard users saying about the mobile web experiences, we've decided that more needs to be done to fix the issues. And we decided to put resources into developing materials and guidelines to help with the details of how to create a mobile site. And we wanted to do this on the basis of data versus expert opinion. So that would give us the confidence in the advice that we would give. So we decided to run a study, and I wrote up a research plan for that, and then teamed up with AnswerLab, who helped us scale and made it happen, to examine how a range of users interacted with a diverse group of mobile websites. And so I'm going to hand over to John now from AnswerLab to tell you about how we set up and ran the study.
We at AnswerLab were very excited about this opportunity to work with Jenny and Google and to be a part of this project. Logistically, it was a pretty daunting project. They wanted over 100 qualitative user sessions spanning 100 mobile websites in 2 cities. The websites we evaluated ranged from large retailers through information providers and service providers. We also included some lesser-known websites that have been growing in adoption to make sure that we weren't only capturing what the biggest or most popular sites were doing. All the participants brought in their own iOS or Android smartphones to use in the study. The study was solely focused on smartphones, and when possible, we tried to have them use their actual network connections and only rely on Wi-Fi if absolutely necessary. Overall, there were 119 participants. That's 119 separate user studies, each an hour long. So as you can see, there were a lot of hours going into this, and there's a very large usability study. Each participant worked through tasks that we provided for each of the sites. The method we used was traditional usability testing with Think Aloud protocol, and so they spoke out loud and shared their thoughts and impressions as they were doing the tasks. This provided us with insight into their understanding and details about when they got stuck or why. They also provided their own ratings for the sites after they were done, and note-takers were in the back room observing the sessions and interviews and logging and categorizing errors and issues that they experienced. This allowed us to go back and really understand what kinds of issues and problems really impacted the ratings that users would provide afterwards. The results of the large usability study that we ran have been collated to form 25 principles of mobile web design. The key findings are intended to help you build better mobile sites and increase engagement with and conversion for your business. We've categorized the principles into 5 sections: mobile homepage and site navigation, mobile site search, mobile commerce and conversions, optimizing form entry, and site-wide design considerations. These principles are all about creating a better user experience for users to enable them to have a trouble-free experience on your site, whether that's a content informational site, a retail or e-commerce site, or a lead generation site.
So let's start with looking at a few principles from the category that relates to the homepage and site navigation. The first and most important thing to do in considering your mobile site is to figure out the primary purpose of mobile web for your business. In our study, we tested interfaces similar to the one on the left and the one on the right. Participants really struggled with the one on the left. The only call to action was learn more, and they were not convinced that they were going to get what they came for. The site from Progressive on the right is a really great example of prioritizing the key tasks and calls to action for a lead generation company. We also tested a women's magazine site, and there were buttons such as specials and looks. They had these labels on them. And these were very vague, and participants, again, didn't know what they would get. So mobile users really want information here and now. So in developing a mobile site, the most important thing is to prioritize the key topics and call to actions and feature them prominently. And secondary content and call to actions can be accessed either further down the screen or behind menu icons. So keeping menus short and sweet is really important on mobile. An extensive menu can work well for your desktop site, but mobile users don't really have the patience to scroll through a long list of options to try and find what they want. So consider how you can present the fewest menu items possible. For instance, Macy's has refined their product categories on its mobile site, presenting users with a shorter and more clearly defined list than on desktop. They have a vast range of products, and so I'm sure it was quite a task to do this, but they've managed it so that it's a better user experience. When mobile users navigate through your site, they want an easy way to get back to your home page. For example, perhaps they want to get back to do another search or browse to a different piece of information or item. In the study, participants usually expected tapping their logo at the top of the page to take them back to the home page. And when this doesn't work, when it was just a logo or it wasn't there to do, then this really frustrated them as they didn't know how to get back. So there's a great example of this principle implemented well from 1-800-Flowers here. So let's summarize this. For mobile homepage and site navigation, we want to keep calls to action front and center. It's important to keep menus short and sweet, and to make it easy for users to get back to the home page. So next we'll look at the importance of mobile site search. So once we've prioritized those calls to action, we look at the importance of how important it is to search on the site. So along with the homepage that focuses on that call to action, our study shows just how important it is to provide good, clear search functionality. So the design on the right is great. No one can miss the search functionality when it comes to the homepage on Home Depot. Now, saying that search is important might not sound at all surprising coming from Google, but the truth is there was some debate in our team before we ran this study, and this was because we knew that typing on mobile can be a pain point for some people. And so some thought that searching by browsing might be more important on mobile. But our study revealed how key search is, and this was found to be particularly so on retail sites. And on non-retail sites, when users were unable to find a call to action that fits their need, we found that they often turned to search next. So site search needs to be highly visible on the home page. It shouldn't really be hidden behind icons. Home Depot, Macy's, and many other major sites manage to do this, so there's really no excuse not to do this. And to really scaffold the user's task, the search needs to be smart. So signs of smart search include providing autocomplete in the search field, suggesting search terms and providing filters, correcting misspellings, and providing related matches in search results. All these things contribute to getting users to the relevant results as soon as possible. And the search also needs to be relevant. And this goes for search results as well as search features like autocomplete. Too often we saw results like those on the left. In that example, the word kids is not really surfacing content in a way that is kind of logical or useful to the user at all. A better example is on the right here, where kids surfaces sweaters, boots, shoes, and jeans. It just makes much more logical sense. On other occasions, we saw lots of irrelevant results. And people really didn't have the patience to swipe through multiple pages of results. If the first few results are not relevant, they tended to leave and go elsewhere. So it's important to make those results really relevant up front. Now filters, we've already mentioned those. Those can go even further to helping users find the results they need. In some cases in our study, we found that even though filters were available, they were located off the screen and people had to scroll to them, so they're kind of easily missed. So the repercussions for not providing filters are high. When users couldn't find good filters, they often abandoned their task because they couldn't reduce the number of results effectively. And note that a user should never be able to inadvertently filter their search results to a null set so that they end up seeing nothing. But we did see this happen in the study. It can be useful to let the user know how many results they'll end up with if they were to apply a particular filter. So providing that kind of information up front is really helpful for people when they're using filters. We saw as well another way to assist in narrowing down of results, and that's to design what can best be described as a guided approach. You can think of these as sort of pre-filters or simple questions to provide more of a guarantee that whatever search terms they subsequently put in they will get relevant set of search results. For example, imagine you're selling a limited set of products, say like shoes, bags, and accessories. And after asking the user which of these they're interested in, you might ask up front what type of shoes your user is interested in, the gender related to the shoe that they're looking for. Male and female is a common way to organize and categorize shoes, and what size they're looking for. One site that we looked at, a different site, offered different types of care. And so they have customers choose the type of care that they're interested in right up front. Because, you know, it's not a great experience if you get pet care choices mixed in with your choices for after-school care. So asking a few simple questions up front can, for some businesses, really help to ensure that users get more relevant results right off the bat. It's particularly useful if there's 1, say, to 3 key attributes that can remove a large portion of the non-relevant search results. So let's think again about the takeaways about mobile site search. They're to make site search visible, ensure that the site results are relevant to the user so that they see that relevance up front, make that search even better by implementing filters, enabling people to narrow those results down, and perhaps using this guided approach to guide users to better site search results. So then we've enabled people to, use your site, come to the site, see the calls to action. We've enabled them to search on the site. And now we'll look at mobile commerce and conversion. There are a number of ways that we discovered the design of sites can help people towards conversion on mobile. People really want to convert on their own terms, and we're going to look at what that means. So we want sites to be designed in a way that will work with them and not against them. So one of the biggest issues we saw was these kind of registration gates, and we want to beware of making enemies at registration gates. Don't require custom account registration up front. Now, it's common in a business to feel that getting access to customer information and their preferences is really important. It can be an integral to your website's success. But it's important also to engage users early and not put them off. So don't ask for this information up front too early. Many of the lowest rated sites frustrated users when they're forced to create an account in order to continue. Users want to explore and browse content before they commit to providing their personal information. Another useful thing to do is to let users check out as a guest. If purchasing or, say, sending off for something is something that people can do on your website, then you want to aim for the option to clearly enable users to check out as guests. The guest option was universally preferred when users didn't have an existing account. And why was that? Well, participants perceived significant benefits from not having to choose and remember a password and receive emails. And they described guest checkout as convenient, simple, easy, and quick. It was certainly what I was looking for when I was using that site to look for the Snow Queen outfit. At the end of the guest checkout process, you have another opportunity to get users to create an account, and you can communicate tangible benefits to them for doing so. For example, so that they can track their order. Also remember that you don't want to negate the benefits of guest purchase by having a process that isn't smooth here. All browsers include the ability to autocomplete forms, so just make sure not to turn that off. Users really like the benefits of autocomplete, so just let the browser do its job here. There are other ways to help users convert too. Providing functionality to allow users to pick up where they left off is important. So we need to seek opportunities to scaffold users' behavior and facilitate cross-channel conversion through the mobile website. How can you help your users who move from one device to another, or simply want to get back to where they were on the same device at a later time? So in that study, we observed several users copying and pasting hyperlinks and emailing them to themselves. And as you can imagine, this can be a quite painful experience. It involves copying the link, then going to find the email client, opening it, pasting the link, and of course your user has now left your site, which is another issue. We saw other participants pinning items to follow up on later. And so they're trying to sort of make this work for themselves. So thinking about that as a company and having a seamless way to do this is very much a need. So users are, they're finding their own convoluted ways to go about this at the moment. So the best practice here is to add the functionality for users to pick up where they left off so that they can remain on your site and pick up again later on from whichever device they happen to be on. And related to this, you do need to create a consistent URL structure on your site so that when people share URLs from their mobile onto the desktop, they can use them. And so on that note, our recommendation is to build a responsive site that enables a consistent URL structure rather than resorting to, say, an m.dot site where you have to redirect users between sites. That's one of the issues with an m.dot site, a separate site. So the takeaways for mobile commerce and conversions are to let users explore before they commit, to let users purchase as a guest, provide that guest checkout option and have them create an account at a later point, enable users to pick up where they left off, and so this can really help your commerce and conversions to become a much smoother experience for the user. So now I'm going to hand over to John, who's going to talk about making forms on mobile a much better experience than it often is today.
Now, filling out web forms on mobile devices is arguably the most difficult experience on the mobile web. As researchers, when we're in the lab and we're talking to users and participants about their experiences browsing the web on their phones, they always complain about one of two things. It's either pinching and zooming in order to read text and try to zoom in on images, having to pan around. And then the other complaint is filling out forms on the phone. In our study, we observed a lot of different users complete a lot of different forms on a lot of different websites, and we learned a lot about it. So we're going to go through a few of those lessons that we learned. Design a form that is efficient for the user to fill in and not overwhelming like the one on the left. We've collectively, as an industry, learned and applied a lot about how to design efficient forms on desktop, but somehow a lot of that got lost in translation and that knowledge hasn't necessarily transferred over to mobile very well. We saw way too many forms that looked like the one on the left in our study. One thing we found was that with a multi-step form, it's helpful to place the easiest steps at the beginning and to show users a labeled progress bar so they know what to expect. This example from Progressive on the right is a nice one. The form is chunked into manageable steps, and each step is clearly labeled so users know what's coming up. And none of the steps were disproportionately more difficult than any of the others. This all gives users confidence and a sense of progression. There was one website that had a registration form that all participants abandoned because the first step of 5 was so long that they didn't want to go through the whole thing. They projected that the subsequent 4 steps would be equally long, when in actuality, steps 2 through 5 were actually very short, and they would be almost done if they just completed that first page. So make sure that all your forms look more like the one on the right than the one on the left. Another useful way to streamline the conversion experience for users is to know and use what already exists in terms of information that the user has provided. We also found that autofilling, when possible, was a huge benefit to users. Believe it or not, participants were really surprised and delighted when companies would autofill or populate information they'd already provided into a form, because in their experiences, it was more typical that they would have to struggle through a form or abandon the task on their mobile because they just couldn't go through the form without mistakes. It was just frustrating them. They would always notice if they had to put any information in twice. So it was particularly frustrating to them when that happened. For registered users, remember to pre-fill their preferences based on the information you have on them. And for any new users, consider offering third-party checkout and any sort of sign-in services that could really expedite the process of getting them up and running. One specific example is to check that you don't require users to enter billing or shipping information that already exists in a third-party checkout account. There was one website that offered third-party checkout, which everyone liked and appreciated as an option for payment, but it also required them to enter their shipping address before they entered their third-party checkout, which was completely unnecessary, and people noticed that. This next lesson is about really taking a close look to make sure you're cutting to the bone and stripping out every unnecessary tap or swipe needed to complete a form. It's about making every single tap count. For submitting information, users would notice and appreciate any websites that would automatically present number pads for entering zip codes using the contextual keyboard, or automatically advancing the phone number fields as they entered them. It can be really painful when that doesn't happen. So if you look at the experience on the left, it's really a poor experience when they have to enter that phone number, because now they have to switch modes from the alphabetical keyboard And then they're forced to use the small numerical keys along the top rather than the large number pad on the right. Two forms can look very similar on the surface when you just look at them, but provide very different experiences when you watch users try to get through them and complete them. So seek out opportunities to eliminate any wasted taps in your form. Any extra tap or swipe that just increases the odds that a user makes a mistake or encounters an issue. Along those same lines, labeling form fields appropriately is really important. If form fields aren't labeled according to best practices, users can run into a lot of different issues. Form fields can be labeled outside of the field. If you choose to label them inside the field to save space, note that there can be issues with this approach. Labels that need to be visible as people are typing in many cases. Otherwise, you're taking the risk that you're relying on them to remember what field they're in. And if they get distracted, or if they just automatically advance to the next field without really paying attention, they may not remember what they're supposed to be inputting at that point. There was one situation where one participant mistakenly entered his street address into the email address field because he had only remembered seeing the word address. Now, working with dates. This recommendation is to provide visual calendars for dates. Users often need more context when they're scheduling appointments and travel dates. So providing a calendar so that they don't have to leave your site and jump to the calendar app on their smartphones is a really smart solution here. Users often struggle to align calendar dates with the days of the week and for any sort of upcoming dates. So not having the day of the week as part of your UI can really cause them to navigate away from your site and to go find it. For booking travel, we saw that people often would get confused if they needed to choose outward and return dates or check-in and check-out dates on the same calendar. They were much more at ease with the process, and the process flowed a lot more smoothly in the cases where there was a separate calendar provided for return flights or checkout. And this recommendation on using visual calendars mainly applies to selecting upcoming dates. For specific dates in the past, like date of birth, it's a lot more efficient just to present a numeric pad with automatically advancing fields. And just things like birthdays, they would have to, if you use the calendar, they may have to go back several years. Now, remember when I mentioned that completing a mobile web form was arguably the most painful mobile experience for users? There's actually one that could be worse. What's actually more painful than that is having to complete a mobile web form again because there were errors the first time that it was submitted. There are a lot of standard web best practices when it comes to helping users recover from and correct their errors. We've learned this from desktop already. Providing clear error messaging rather than encrypted codes and terminology, highlighting the fields that need to be corrected. There's a lot of knowledge and a lot of best practices we've already established from that. But really the best way to address submission errors in web forms, especially on mobile, is to avoid them altogether. Using clear field labels and descriptions combined with real-time error validation were the most effective combination for ensuring that users went through a mobile form only once. So let's summarize the takeaways about optimizing form entry. Design efficient forms with balanced and clearly labeled steps. Using pre-existing information so that they only have to enter anything in at most once. Streamline information entry. Minimize form errors with labeling and good descriptions. Providing visual calendars for upcoming dates. And provide real-time validation of forms, so that they only have to submit it once. For our final section, we wanted to highlight a number of site-wide design principles that we uncovered during the course of observing users. So we're going to take a look at these now. One of the main reasons that you make a mobile-optimized site is because it's painful to have to pinch and zoom all the time, which is often what's required when you're browsing a desktop site on your mobile phone. It's hard to zoom and pan around on a mobile phone screen, and it often leads to trouble with reading text or viewing images. Some of the really frustrating experiences we observed in the study were when the home screen would, for some reason or another, just load in automatically zoomed in, like you see on the left. That would be their first impression of the site. When a user zooms in on the screen, or when they're forced to, you lose control over the design in many ways. You lose control of what they see and what they feel like they can interact with. So it increases the likelihood of having discoverability issues with your key content areas or calls to action. So make sure that there aren't areas of your site that require users to pinch and zoom. Now, images are similar on mobile. They can be very small, and so the best practice is to really ensure that any image a user might want to enlarge is tappable or expandable in some way. On retail sites especially, customers want to see what they're buying. Our study showed that people expected to be able to view high-resolution close-ups of any products to get a better look. They wanted to see details and textures on clothing to really gauge its quality. And they would get frustrated or even leave if they weren't able to do so. A good example of providing tappable, expandable images can be found on the JProof site here. And also now onto GPS location. We saw a few examples of GPS location information that was being poorly applied. It can be very tempting to take advantage of all the wonderful sensors and features available on smartphones and to really integrate them into your site. But if you incorporate them in the wrong way, they can really backfire and make for a worse user experience. The example on the left is likely to be problematic. There is no context as to why the site wants your location. In our study, when users were asked to book a hotel room in Boston for a conference on one particular hotel site, they were prompted to share their GPS location immediately after hitting the Find and Book call to action on the home page. Accepting the request resulted in the location field automatically populating the user's current city, but we felt that several participants who accepted this request hadn't really thought about why it was being asked. So one user became stuck and particularly frustrated because she struggled to understand why she kept being shown hotels in San Francisco when she wanted to book a room in Boston. There are also UI issues with the implementation of GPS location. There was one site that was similar to the layout that you see on the right, except in the destination field, instead of city or airport, it had already populated current location with a target sign like that. And it looked to the users like they would need to tap into that field to activate the current location. And so they kept trying to do that, and it would erase what was in that field. So what was actually happening was the site was trying to make it a shortcut so that they would leave, if they left the field alone, it would automatically detect their current location and submit it accordingly. But they didn't realize that. They kept trying to go in there to activate current location. So it's better to provide a better experience to be provided involves making sure that the user always understands why you're asking them for location. And it's helpful then to let users choose to populate the location field through a clear call to action like find near me, rather than trying to take steps for them. Now this next point is about thinking of the reasons why users might leave your site and catering to those needs within your site. Having the user switch between browser windows on a smartphone can be really problematic. Anyone who's watched their parents try to use their smartphone probably can relate to this. A lot of smartphone users right now may not think to open a new tab or a browser window. They might just navigate directly away from your site, and they may not ever find their way back. This can happen particularly for things like for price comparisons, trying to read user reviews, or finding coupon codes during checkout. So ensure that your calls to action stay in the same browser window and address ways that consumers might switch windows in other ways. One good example that we saw was to display your own coupons and deals within the site, which may prevent them from looking elsewhere. A lot of the mobile websites we tested also had mobile apps available, and all of them promoted their apps in one way or another. Not surprisingly, participants weren't always pleased with the way some websites promoted their apps. Participants were trying to do something on these mobile sites, and they didn't appreciate anything that hindered them or made the task more difficult to complete. Some sites would promote their app with a full page overlay on the home page, or even worse, there'd be an entire interstitial screen that would be an additional page load. While this approach is definitely noticeable, people definitely noticed it, it really annoyed all but the most loyal and familiar customers. Many sites promoted their apps as a banner along the top or bottom, and users were fine with these banners as long as they were reasonably sized and dismissible. They weren't very happy, however, when the banners got too large and taking up too much space, and they were unable to dismiss them. They wouldn't go away. In many cases, in landscape orientation, these banners were even worse because they occupied a very valuable vertical screen space. Both Android and iOS users were most familiar with seeing the top banner app promotion that they could dismiss, and they could also recognize that these were not ads in most cases. So make sure that your promotions are not getting in the way of the key call to action for your site and the tasks that users are trying to complete. Your mobile website really provides you with an opportunity to engage with your users, so don't squander that opportunity in this way. Really make sure that you give the best impression and best experience first before you promote your app. And this is one of our most important principles. It's about taking all of these design best practices and creating a mobile optimized experience. Our study clearly illustrated how users strongly preferred mobile optimized sites over desktop sites viewed on mobile devices. The desktop sites on mobile devices have lower user ratings, lower task success rate, and more observed user errors and issues than the ones that were optimized for mobile. However, we found that some sites would actually mix together mobile optimized pages and desktop experience pages on mobile. For example, the home page and the landing pages might be optimized for mobile, but then the tasks would lead to product details pages or search results that would be actually for the desktop experience on mobile. These types of sites actually scored even lower across the board, more errors, lower ratings than even the sites that were fully desktop, although the number of those kind of mixed mashup sites wasn't that high. It can be tempting to go with a really gradual phased rollout of your mobile optimized website, especially since a home page and a landing page might be easier and quicker to develop and launch. But really, you'd be doing a disservice to yourself and to your users by taking this route. And it's very likely you'd be better off just waiting until the entire site is mobile optimized. So to summarize these site-wide design considerations, don't make users pinch and zoom. Provide expandable, tappable images so that they can really get close up to anything that they might want to view. Be clear why you need a user's location, and don't just ask for it by default. Keep your user in a single browser window so they don't leave your site. Don't let promotions for your app steal the show. Instead, give them a really great mobile web experience. And optimize your entire site for mobile rather than a piece at a time.
Great. So we hope that these ideas about the things you can do to improve the user experience on your mobile website are helpful to you. And I know that you're unlikely to have memorized this presentation, so we have a white paper that you can download. The URL is here, and it explains all 25 principles. So that brings us to the end of the presentation portion, and at this point, we will move to questions that you have all submitted.
So, and feel free to continue to submit questions. We're going to go with some of the ones that were submitted already. So one question that came up was, from your experience, are there any sites that are doing it right?
Yeah, so I think we've presented, in this presentation here, we've talked about a number of things that some sites are doing right, with some examples. So, you know, having a nice clear search bar was really important, and we saw Home Depot and other sites do that. And, you know, because we are trying to get people to purchase on mobile, and they really want to see the details of different things when they go to different sites. I really like the way that J.Crew has implemented, you know, being able to tap and expand the image in a really clear way. And then there was Progressive's sort of experience with that really nicely designed form that I think nearly all the participants that took part in those sessions, their experience was really good with that, and it didn't seem like an onerous task at all.
Yeah, and one surprise for me was that it wasn't always just the largest major websites that were doing the most innovative things. There were some of the smaller websites that have really advanced filtering functions that allowed you to kind of see live, you know, dynamically see as you apply multiple filters how many results you would have left. And that just for like a travel website and for booking flights, and that was really useful for users to be able to quickly filter down and see like exactly what they were looking for flights from between two airports within a certain price range. So I thought that was really interesting too. So the next question that we have here.
Somebody's asked, should they build a custom experience on mobile, or is responsive design the way to go? So this is a question that comes up often, and you know, I think it's seen as a big sort of undertaking to build a responsive site when you know, you originally maybe only looking to sort of build specifically a mobile site, but now you're looking at kind of both desktop and mobile, and being able to cater for tablets as well. You know, ideally, and Google has kind of taken a position in this now, that responsive web design is the way to go. It's not necessarily the right answer in every circumstance, because of course there's all sorts of factors to take into account. There's sort of the age of your different sites for desktop, the age of your site. You know, if you just developed a site for desktop independently, then it's a big undertaking to think about kind of redoing that again. But the advantages of responsive design are really big, having this only one code base to maintain rather than different code bases, and not having to worry about the redirects for URLs between different sorts of sites is, quite major. And I know quite often the question about performance comes up with responsive sites, but there are more and more articles on the way to that are available and tools to help you kind of assess the performance of your site. And there are more techniques and tips and techniques for developing responsive sites that perform really well. And in the views of the developer relations team that I discussed this with at Google, because I'm not so much on the technical side, they have now a number of tips and techniques for performance, for combating performance issues with responsive sites. So I think I've seen also a number of articles outside of Google that says, responsive sites do get this rap for performance issues, but actually there are ways to address that now. And so developing a responsive site will take care of needs for obviously all the different device sizes that are coming up. But one thing I would point out is that it's not a kind of magic wand thing. You still have to think about how to organize that site so that you have the best experience on desktop, the best experience on mobile, even if it is responsive. So that work and that thought about what's needed on different sorts of device sizes still needs to be put in.
Another question, is a hamburger icon a good way of approaching navigation on pages other than a home page? So one thing I will say about the hamburger icon is that it's not a universally recognized navigation method yet for users. It might in the future be in the future. It is being very widely used as such, but we consistently see issues with users using that menu icon as a replacement for kind of a persistent navigation menu that you would see on a desktop website. So if you have key navigation calls to action that you want them to take from any page, it needs to be on the page and visible. If it's not visible to them, they're not thinking of looking for it in the menu icon unless it's like an absolute, they can't find anything else. It's almost like the last resort is the menu icon. So if you have important areas that you want them to explore beyond any page, it's really important to put it visible on the screen. Any other?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it is becoming more recognized, but I agree with your, so over time, those sort of secondary calls to action, you will not have any, you shouldn't have any problems putting those secondary calls to action there over time because it is becoming more and more recognized. But, even so, it's kind of, to the eye as it sees the website straight off, if it's behind something or within a menu, then it is hidden. It's not out there up front as a primary call to action. So as John says, if it's primary, then it should be up front.
Okay. And another question, how often did a mobile site offer a native app alternative? And did users indicate whether they would prefer to use a native app instead of the mobile website? One thing we observed is that there's kind of like this, we're seeing more and more of this kind of app bloat trend, where people are running out of space on their phones, or there's a perception that too many apps will slow them down. And so we're seeing more and more where people are like, at first in the heydays, I guess, of apps, people were just downloading and installing and using any apps they could get their hands on. But it's kind of reached a point now where we're seeing more and more mobile users who are a little more hesitant and want a good experience and want to really feel like they have a relationship with the service before they commit to downloading an app. And obviously, if they have no other choice and they really want to use that, there's not really many other choices but to use the app. But if you can provide a really great mobile web experience, it's a great way to kind of build that relationship with them so they eventually do use your app.
Yeah, I often hear companies sort of talk about mobile websites being there for search and sort of apps being there for engaging the users. But I think this is kind of a too simplistic way to look at it. And given what we've seen with some mobile sites, I really do agree with John that your mobile site can be both a gateway, but also in and of itself, it can engage a whole group of users there who might never want to download the app. Having said that, apps also provide a great experience, and there are some specific reasons why you might want to use apps in specific circumstances. I think a lot of companies see a home for their users both on the mobile website and on the app. And of course now there's also some effort because of the issues that John mentioned with regard to people having many apps on their phone to figure out ways to bring people back to those apps. So I know Google's been doing some initial work that we've released around deep linking into apps. So there's those kind of ways to re-engage as well. But I think it's, you know, a very interesting issue, like how should a company think about their app? How should a company think about the mobile site? I think both places are places where users can be engaged, and the site can be a gateway to that.
I think we have time for one last question. This one is, was there significant data or differences found regarding users' preferences to drop-downs or keyboard entry to adjust item quantity? And I guess this kind of topic is near dear to my heart because I like a lot of the optimizing form entry questions. And I think for this particular one, it really depends on your anticipated, the range of that quantity. If you're looking at primarily 1, 2, 3 at most, like for instance travel sites for a number of travelers, actually what's most efficient there, and this is really about that whole taps and swipes thing I talked about earlier. This is really about minimizing the number of taps and swipes. And the most, when you only anticipate 1 to 3 for like 99% of the cases, using an on-screen selector is actually most efficient. Neither keyboard nor drop-down. Just having a plus minus that's on-screen that they can push and it'll automatically advance it, that was probably the most efficient, fewest taps and swipes way to do it. If you're looking at 1 to 10, now it's maybe drop-down because it's like a tap and a swipe and then a tap. But if you're looking at more than that, then now you're looking at possibly keyboard because they have to enter in, you know, 900 or 856. In that case, a keyboard might be actually most efficient.
Okay, so over to you, Greg. Thanks everybody.
Great. Thanks, Jenny and John. Thank you to all of the observers today for sharing your time. If we didn't get to your questions, we'll be following up via email. Also this afternoon, we'll be sending a link to the 25 Principles for Mobile Design white paper that Jenny referenced. Should you have any additional questions, please feel free to respond to that email or contact us directly at info@answerlab.com. Thanks again.